So some of the things you will hear tonight is going to be scary. And I don't want to be this person who scares you, but I want to be a person who maybe shares information about what is actually going on in the world, specifically regarding Islam. And Islam in Africa. Africa is a big place. When you look at this map, you can see it fits in the whole of the US, China, UK, Japan, India, whole lot of Western Europe. It's a really, really big place. But it's also a very, very dark place. Just look at that satellite photo at night. Just compare Africa to Europe, and if we had a picture of the US, it would be even worse. So it's a big place, but also a very dark place, and a dark place spiritually, although we know God is working in different parts of Africa and in people's hearts across Africa. So some facts and figures about Africa. And I should have come in, first of all, with a disclaimer about this presentation. And the seats should have been fitted with seat belts, because it's going to be a whirlwind trip through facts and figures and quotes and maps and all kinds of things. And it is just a taster. I don't expect you to take in all I say. Some of it might hit home on 1 or 2 points for you, but it is going to be a whirlwind tour. So I'm going to go quite quickly. I was actually thinking about having someone in the front with a red flag and a green flag. And as long as the green flag was up, I keep going. And when the red flag came up, then I'll know they've had enough. I didn't come around to that. Maybe that's a good thing. But let's see how we go. So facts and figures about Africa. Poverty. There are 54 countries in Africa, the newest country being South Sudan. Population of just under 1 billion. 1.3% of the world's GDP comes out of Africa. 1.3%. Just remember that when you look at Africa compared to the rest of the world. Okay, so Africa is bigger than the rest of the world. It only produces 1.3% of the world's GDP. 4 countries produce 87% of that 1.3%. So it's incredible how poor Africa is. 50% live on less than $1 a day. The poverty datum line is about $2 a day. So half of the continent live at a poverty level that is below what the poverty level should actually be. 30% are malnourished, and about 50 million live in famine at any one time. Famine, we thinking about Ethiopia type and Sudan type famine conditions. Disease, we all know HIV/AIDS. 25 million have HIV/AIDS. 22.5 of those are just in sub-Saharan Africa. 500 million people affected by malaria globally. 90% of those are in Africa. A child dies every 30 seconds from malaria. 46% of the world's conflicts are in Africa. 1 in 4 countries currently affected is affected by conflict in Africa. These little stars you see over there on that map are conflicts that have happened in Africa in the last 10 years. Most of them actually happened in the last 3 years. Just an interesting side point, only 4 are non-Islamic caused conflicts. So half of the continent's countries live, if they're not in conflict, they live in danger of conflict, according to the UN. So all these facts and figures come mostly from the UN or the CIA fact book. 20 million are refugees. So that's the situation. That's setting the picture. So we've got poverty, famine, AIDS, malaria, conflict, corruption, poor governance, crime, tribalism, and within all of this, I want to tell you about Islam. But I want to tell you that it's all interlinked. It's all comes from Satan. He is trying to divide, to steal, to destroy. And it's all part of his overall plan. So I'm going to be just teaching you one part of his overall plan, which is the Islamic part. However, if you look at it all interlinks. It's all dovetailed into one. So facts and figures about Islam. 53% of the continent is Islamic and growing. Africa is about 38% Christian and growing. Now, we don't exactly know the figures for the growth rates. So the different figures that I saw range from about 1.4% growth of Islam to 225% growth in Islam. So that's the range, between 1 and 200. So the 200 and something percent was from an Islamic source. The trusted source that I'm going to go with is about 6.5% to 7%. So if you look at if Africa has a billion people, that's 35 million new Muslims every year in Africa. 35 million new Muslims. Most of that is population growth, although conversion is also very, very high. Muslims have 3 or 4 wives, and they are encouraged to have as many children as possible. And then out of Africa, they're pushing up into Europe. Europe has the fastest growing Islamic rate in the world, and that now is, we're talking about hundreds of percent. Many people would say that the Christian rate and the Christian population in Africa is about 50%. Now, I don't know about that so much. I spend a lot of time in Africa. I've probably visited more than 20-something countries in Africa, and I've looked at the state of the church in Africa, and I'm very, very shocked about the state of the church in Africa. There's lots of, there's an old saying that says, Christianity in Africa is a mile wide but an inch deep. And that's probably the right thing about it. To give you another fact, Swaziland says 80% of Swaziland is Christian, yet 80% of those consult a witch doctor every year, at least once a year. Okay, so they might be going to heaven, but they're not practicing what we would call Christianity on a daily basis. They're still tied in with all kinds of tribal and other social things. So when we think about Islam, many people would think like this. This is what God sees. He sees children, okay? And I want you to remember the whole time we're going through this presentation that God loves Muslims. He loves the people. He loves us just as much as he loves them. And he loves them just as much as he loves us. He hates the religion. He hates what binds the Muslims in a false religion. Okay, so when God looks at Muslims, he sees children. Just as he looks at us, he sees children. So remember that as we go through this. This is a cautionary tale. This is a school in Newcastle High School. Anyone from Newcastle here? Yeah, one person from Newcastle. Did you go to Newcastle High? No, okay. But you know Newcastle High. So Newcastle High, about 4 years ago, they had always had the same school governing body and this school governing body president. And he had been there for about 10 years, and everyone knew he was going to be voted in the next year and the next year and the next year. So about 4 or 5 years ago, time came to vote in the school governing body president. So he arrived, the secretary was there, and about 3 parents were there to vote him in. One nominated, one seconded, and someone else voted. The meeting was supposed to close at 6 o'clock. 2 minutes to 6, 60 Muslims arrived. They nominated a Muslim governing body president, and there were 60 people to vote him in. Within the first month, the Christian headmaster had been replaced. Now, Newcastle High School, I don't know if you've heard of an organization called African Enterprise. They ran quite a few different missions into Newcastle High School, and they didn't have hymns during assembly. They had praise and worship with guitars and bands and drums and everything like that. They had almost everyone in the school was part of the Student Christian Council. It was a pumping Christian school. Within 1 month, the Christian headmaster had been replaced. 3 months later, the vice principal had been replaced by a Muslim. And slowly the teachers were all replaced. They banned prayers. They closed down the SCA. There was a publication that was printed, which was the centenary of Newcastle High School, and it was banned. It was recalled because it was too Christian. It had a student population of about 1,000. Most of them now are not Christian. The Christian parents have taken their kids out and has now been replaced by Muslims. I heard the story from someone who was at Newcastle High School. I did a bit of research, and I phoned around 16 schools in Pietermaritzburg. And within 6 months of this, 16 schools in Pietermaritzburg, the same thing had happened to them, or had tried to happen to them. So this is a cautionary tale of what happens at a school, but it's happening at national and global levels. Christians are not being, they're not awake, they're not getting involved, they're not on the student and the school governing bodies. They are just, whatever happens, it's over there, we're going to focus on our Christianity. Okay? And if we don't wake up, Newcastle High School, or South Africa is going to go like Newcastle High School. Africa is going to go like Newcastle High School, and the world is going to go like Newcastle High School. And this is a picture of a Muslim school in Pietermaritzburg where the similar thing had happened. So understanding the Islamic objective. When you boil down the Islamic objective, this is it. And this is written by a scholar in the US. And he said the Islamic State is ideological. It does not have a world purpose. It does have a world purpose, which it pursues with all the power at its disposal. This purpose is the extension of itself to envelop the world. The Islamic State is a world order with a government, a court, a constitution, and an army. The Islamic State cannot rest until it succeeds in establishing this world order. That is the bottom line of what Islam is doing. There might be a lot of things we hear about Muslims wanting tolerance and peace and everything like that. But just as Christianity wants to spread across the whole world, bringing peace and love and bringing people into the kingdom of God, Muslims believe Islam needs to conquer the world. And they do it mainly through violence, not exclusively through violence. This is the OIC, not the Olympic Committee. This is the Organization for Islamic Conference, which is now called Organization for Islamic Cooperation. And it's kind of like the United Nations of Islam. Okay? It's a group of countries that if you are Muslim, you can belong to it. However, if you belong to it, you also get a number of different trade agreements. You get discounted oil. You get all kinds of really, really cool benefits for being part of this. So a number of Christian countries are now part of the OIC. And in Islamic terms, if you become a member of this organization, you are declaring your country as Islamic. So some countries might only have 5 or 2 or 10% Muslim population. But by joining this, you're actually declaring to the world and the Islamic world that you are now an Islamic state. And now the Islamic State is by the overall Islamic nation of Islam, which is called the Ummah. Its main priority is to convert every single person in that country to Islam, now that you've declared it. So there are a number of countries there. Let's have a closer look at it. You can see where we are in Southern Africa. It's getting pretty close, eh? The different colors represent different percentages of Islam in those countries. Okay. I had a dream. I sound like Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream. No, I had a dream once, and I dreamt that I dreamt of the UN, and I dreamt that on the UN Council, which I don't know if you know there are 5 main nations. There's permanent members: the US, China, France, the UK, and Russia, and they're permanent members. And then you have a whole lot of other on the Security Council, other members that kind of make decisions. And then you have all the other countries that are part of this, and regions vote in a country to be on the Security Council. I had a dream that there was going to be a new sixth member, and it was going to be the Nation of Islam. And I woke up and I thought, wow, that's so strange. And then I dug around a bit, and I found that the OIC is a member. It's not a permanent member, and it's not on the Security Council, but it is a member of the UN, as if it is a country. It is representing the Nation of Islam on the UN. It's crazy. So this OIC group, they met in the early 2000s, and they met in Nigeria, and they said, how are we going to change Africa? And at that stage, in about the mid-'80s to the early 90s going forward, they actually thought Africa was a lost cause for them. They said, we're going to give up on Africa. The churches are in there, they're building schools, they're doing missions, they're doing humanitarian aid, they are meeting people's needs, they're feeding people. How can we compete with this? And they released a thing in the early 90s saying, we've lost this. We've lost Africa. We need to do something about it. And they established something called the United Nations, United Muslim Nations. And this is like a kind of a secret organization. So politically, worldwide, they see this. The world sees this. This organization, which actually looks pretty good. If you go onto the website, you can see they do a lot of good things. Secretly, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to do all the things that the churches did before, meeting people's needs. And if you look at this, it's like Muslim businesses, building hospitals, charity, providing security with policing and things like that. But if you look at it also, there's some other crazy things in there. There's madrasa, which is the Islamic theological colleges. There's control of the military. There's some other things which I'll get to in a bit. Building mosques. But they go in with a soft approach, disaster response, charity. And through this, Islam has been strengthening its position in Africa. And in the last few years, it's really, really kind of developed momentum. One of the things they try and do is control trade routes and resources. Now, this is it looks like a bit of a mess picture. The story behind this is there was a pastor in Zimbabwe, and he was flying from Zimbabwe to Malawi, and the guy sitting next to him was one of these Muslims, big beard, hat, full dress. And so he just started talking to him. He said, "Oh, what you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm a farmer, and I do." He didn't tell him he was a pastor. And he said to the Muslim, "What do you do?" And the guy said, "Well, do you know, I actually build mosques." So, "Oh, that's very interesting." Thinking one or two. "No, where do you build mosques?" "Oh, no, I've got a budget of about $60 million a year to build mosques." "Oh, really? Where are you building these mosques?" "Oh, all these roads that are being built and all these railway lines that are being built. Well, it's all Islamic funded. And we have agreements with the governments. If we build these roads, then we're allowed to build mosques." So he said, "Oh, really? Show me. So this guy, he found a map. He had an old scrapbook, and he had this map. He said, "Draw me what you're doing." So the Muslim guy drew his whole strategy, and this is it. The areas in pink are areas where the Muslims believe they've taken ground. Do you see where we are? Muslims believe Durban is taken. They believe Cape Town is taken and Joburg is taken. The blue areas are where they're focusing on next, and those are specific trade routes. So I looked into this, and this is just one of the many, many different trade routes that they have. And this is called the Nacala Development Corridor. It stretches from Zambia. It actually goes all the way through to the Copper Belt in northwest Zambia. It goes right through to Nacala. And it's been completely funded by Islamic countries and Islamic Development Bank and the Arab Development Bank and things like that. And along these routes, now it's an interlink of railway lines and roads, there's a mosque built every 3 Ks. Crazy, every 3 Ks. I heard this either as the talking rubbish. I flew to Malawi along one of these routes here. And you can see that one that goes up along Malawi there. And I drove 400 Ks, and I counted the mosques for 400 Ks. And I divided the number of mosques by 400 Ks, and I got to 3.3 Ks per mosque. For 400 Ks. And this guy was saying, we are building this from Cape to Cairo. There's a spiritual significance behind this. Where the Muslims have their mosques, there's always a call to prayer, and you've probably heard it. In the mornings you would hear that. If you haven't heard it yourself, you've heard it on movies. Muslims believe wherever that sound lands, that area is claimed for Islam. So, and they also think that the sound only goes to about 1.5 Ks. So 1.5 Ks, and you have the 3K distance. That's why it's 3 Ks. So they've got a strategy where they're connecting all of Africa spiritually and geographically, declaring it for Islam. And we are just sitting by and letting it happen. The president of Malawi, Bingu, who has just passed away, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was some religious tension that was happening in Malawi. And Muslims attacked some Christians, and Christians, I don't know if they were real Christians, obviously not, maybe, but they attacked some Muslim mosques, and 19 mosques were burnt down. What happened was, in a bid during the elections to gain favor of the Muslims, he said, well, I will repay what was burnt down. He built 200 mosques in Malawi. 16 years ago, Malawi had a Muslim population of 5%. It's now 15%. Some Muslim sources say it's 24%. Muslims believe when the population gets to about 30% Islam, the nation falls to Islam. Those of you who've read The Tipping Point, there seems to be a tipping point at about 30%. That's just one country of many. This is the Africa Muslim Agency, and they engage in something called dawah. Dawah is the Muslim version of evangelism. They go out and spread the Islamic word, so to speak. One of the things they're doing is focusing specifically on tribes. The biggest growth of Islam in South Africa is in the black populations in the townships, specifically focusing on tribes. It's not just in South Africa, it's all over Africa. You can read this, but it's Kenya, Madagascar, and it carries on. And you can see when they've started, in 94, 97, Guinea, specifically focusing on tribes. I was speaking to Grant last night, and he mentioned that he went to travel to the DRC. And when I was in the DRC, we were at very similar places, in a place called Bukavu. And I was sitting in a cafe there, and I saw a whole lot of guys walk past, and they were all dressed in Islamic dress. And I said, wow, you got lots of quite a few Muslims here. He said, no, they're not Muslims, those are the tribal chiefs. I said, what? Why are they dressed as Muslims? He said, no, they've been to visit Gaddafi. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So Gaddafi was taking tribal leaders, chiefs, all over Africa, flying them up, lavishing them in 5-star accommodation and treating them like royalty, and saying, you guys are the future of Africa, you need to align yourself with Islam, come with us, we are walking this journey together, you're the new generation of African leaders, we need to recreate Africa as a United States of Africa. He said, most of the leaders, African national leaders, are really focused on their own power. They're focused on their private jets, they're focused on their specific power. They have no real interest in the United States of Africa. So what Gaddafi and many other Islamic states and organizations were doing, they're targeting tribes. because ethnic groups don't really worry too much about politics. You can, if you attack the tribes, you can change the country from grassroots up. And that is one of the strategies that is happening. Another strategy, which we talked about, is meeting the needs of people. This is a school. I think this is, I can't remember which country this is. I think it's Burundi. Yeah, it is Burundi. What had happened in Burundi is that Muslim countries approached the Burundian government and said, can we build schools? And you give us the land, we'll build schools. And the Burundian government said, no problem. We have a massive education problem. We've got about 250 kids per class. If you can build as many schools as you want. And so they built all these schools. So Muslims are building schools, but their schools come with a kind of a catch. To belong to the school, you've got to be Islamic. If you want your children to go to the school, you've got to convert to Islam. This is happening across Africa, not just in Burundi. It's actually happening in our backyards. This is a picture of that Islamic school that I showed you in Pietermaritzburg. This is a Christian girl who's been forced to go to the school by her aunt. Her parents are dead because free education, 2 meals a day. She gets clothes. She gets a chance to go to university. If she does well enough, she gets a scholarship to go to university. The boys are sponsored on one sports tour a year. And they go to Cape Town, they go to Joburg, and also, if you are an orphan, there's a hostel there. This school started, it had one class. It started in grade 1, and then grade 1s went to grade 2, then they had a grade 2 teacher, then grade 3, and they just fed. It's now all the way up to matric, and there are about 7 or 8 new schools built there as well. Here we see something out of Uganda, and I know his church is working in Uganda, and this is one of the areas his church is working in, called Mbali. Look at the bottom there. School, mosque, and water project. Meeting the needs of the community. Meeting the needs through the school, through the water project, but also attached to that is the mosque. Here's a hospital in Burundi. It's been built, it's a Muslim hospital, and if you want to be treated in this Muslim hospital, you have to sign that you're a Muslim. It offers free healthcare to pregnant women, prenatal care and postnatal care, as long as your child is given a Muslim name when it's born. In a country that is maybe 3rd or 4th poorest country in the world, healthcare is a major issue. If you don't have healthcare, you die. What are you going to do as someone who doesn't have healthcare? This is one of the mosques that I took a picture of along that road that was being built. There are hundreds of mosques that are all empty. And I spoke to one of the guys building the mosque, and I said, why are you building a mosque? There's no one here. Who's going to come and fill this mosque? He said, you build the hive, the bees will come. Africa, as you know, is full of refugees. Refugees go away, they flee an area, they come back. They've lost their identity, they've lost their homes, lost their businesses, they've lost their family. What often happens is that Muslims set up kind of reception stations. When they go away to a refugee place, a lot of those refugee camps are run by Muslims, and they are kind of indoctrinated into Islam, and they return as Muslims. If that doesn't happen, when they return to their countries, there are Islamic reception stations where they'll give you a free home, they will give you a business or employment, and look after your needs. You have lost your family, and you're invited immediately into a community that supports you. And it's not surprising many people go and join. They might not always do it in their hearts. It might just be a survival thing, but the issue is they're not following our Lord. Businesses. This is also in Uganda. Uganda has about 10% Muslim population, and about 70% of all businesses in Uganda are controlled by Muslims. 10% population, 70% control. Crazy. This is just a picture of a normal market. Almost all of this market is run by Muslims. Taxis. If you want to catch a taxi, run by Muslims. If they don't like you or feel that you're too Christian, sorry, you don't get a lift. If you want to sell something as a farmer, show us that you're Muslim, we'll buy the stuff and then we can sell it for you. If you want to buy from them, we need you to be a Muslim. Show us that you're a Muslim and you can buy from us. Okay, here's a bit of an interesting journey I'm going to take you on. And so just bear with me for a moment. In 2001, there's an organization called Al-Aqsa Foundation in South Africa. 2001, do you remember what happened in the US? Okay, what happened? Okay, so you're still there. Good. Okay, 2001, 9/11 happened. The world said, the Muslim problem. These Muslim organizations are out there, they're funding terrorism, we need to shut them down. So the world pretty much got together and said, right, let's identify some of these Muslim countries that are supporting Islam and some of the terrorism, and some Muslim organizations that are supporting it. A lot of them were cloaked in something called charity, and they were collecting money for charity, and it was going unnoticed. I don't know if it was going completely unnoticed, but nothing was being done about it. One of the organizations in South Africa was called the Al-Aqsa Foundation. Now, the Al-Aqsa, who knows what that picture is? It's in Israel, correct. Yeah, it is where the temple should be. Okay, so Al-Aqsa is the mosque in Israel, in Jerusalem. Now, it also kind of stands for the liberation of Israel. It stands for, we want Israel back in the hands of Muslims. Okay, so Al-Aqsa, when you hear Al-Aqsa, it's directly means the mosque. Symbolically, it means the takeover of the whole of Israel back for Islam. So 2001, South Africa shut down on the huge pressure. They didn't want to. The South African government didn't want to, but they did bow under the pressure of the US to shut down this Al-Aqsa Foundation that was supporting terrorism and a number of links. About 3 or 4 weeks later, this other organization starts up called Friends of Al-Aqsa. Coincidence? I don't know. There are quite a few things that actually link the two together. Basically, they shut down it, moved a couple of things away, kept a lot of things like same phone numbers, same bank accounts, and carried on. So the US said, okay, we've shut, to the US, they said we shut them down, and they just reopened. This is some of the things off the website. I don't know if you can read that. Israel has to be destroyed. And a number of other things. So these are some of the things. One of the things in there, they've got endorsements by various people. And this is a thank you letter by a guy called Takruri. And it's saying, thank you, Friends of Al-Aqsa. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for, what does it say? So the honor us with more of your kindness. Your contribution to the social upliftment has also accelerated the process of our liberation. I think there's a lot of euphemisms in there. Anyway, this guy, Takruri, so he wrote this letter in 2006. He wrote a book called Suicide Operations in the Balance of, and he had some Arabic word that I didn't even know about. But it basically is suicide operations that are justified. And it says, giving up one's life in a holy war. These scholars, this is a book review of this book, okay? And it says pretty much that Islamic terrorism and Islamic suicide bombing is completely justified. And it's the mission of every believer, Islamic believer, Muslim believer, was to inflict as many casualties as possible on the enemies of Islam. Suicide for the sake of Islam was implicitly justified by the desperate reality of the Muslim world under the yoke of Western domination. This is an organization that is supporting this in operating in South Africa. This is another letter on their website. It's difficult to see, so let's blow it up a bit. On this basis, we salute you and feel honored by your firm stand with our nation, politically, socially, and materially. Now jihad has become compulsory on every Muslim until Al-Aqsa is liberated free. He who is unable to make jihad upon himself, let him make jihad with his money. because Allah's messenger, peace be upon him, said, whoever equips a fighter is as if he has gone to jihad himself. And says also, whoever left behind a fighter in his family, then it is like participating in jihad. Okay, this is written by this guy. Anyone know who he is? General knowledge question. Founder of this group called Hamas. This is 3 days before he died. The Israelis link him to numerous suicide bombs in Israel and across the world. This is a South African organization being thanked by this guy. So this South African organization, Friends of Al-Aqsa, they had a conference. A number of speakers were invited. One of the main speakers was a guy called Ibrahim Gabriels. Ibrahim Gabriels is the head of the Muslim Judicial Council of South Africa. And this is what they say on their website. They don't even hide it on their website. The Institute believes that supporting resistance against the Zionist enemy is the main road leading to the rescue and protection of Al-Quds. Okay. Liberation of Palestine under the Zionists, the enemy. Okay. Muslim Judicial Council. Now, I've taken you on a bit of a journey. What does that have to do with us? The Muslim Judicial Council is also the guys who run most of the halal food that we have in South Africa. Okay. So, if you go to your fridge, if you go to your cupboard, open your cupboard, you've probably noticed it. Who has noticed the halal sticker? You've all noticed it. Okay. Companies have to pay a premium to have that sticker on their product. And I'm going to go on for about 5 minutes on halal, so bear with me. It's a massive subject, and 5 minutes doesn't do it justice. Halal is something that means permissible. The opposite of halal is haram. Now, the Quran doesn't say anything about halal. It only says things that are haram, things that are not permissible. So, things that are haram is alcohol, pork, crustaceans, that's things like crabs and lobsters, and camel, and a couple of other things depending on what brand of Islam you follow. So, by definition, water probably doesn't have it. Some waters do. Water, by the fact that it is water, is halal. It is permissible, just because it is water. You don't have to have a sticker on this to say that it is halal. Because it's water, it's halal. If you have a tomato, by the fact that it's a tomato, you don't have to have a halal tomato. And I might just joke about tomatoes, but a friend of mine wrote to me this week, actually became a friend because he wrote to me. He said, so he said, I hear you're like kind of interested in this whole Islam thing, you know, what is it about? And so I told him, he said, I work for a company that does food processing, and we have just been asked if our tomatoes are halal. And I don't know how to answer that. So I said, well, you can just tell them it's a tomato, it's halal. You know, it doesn't have to have a stamp. He says, no, they're asking for the stamp. And they have to pay 750,000 rand a year to have that stamp on their food. There's a company in Cape Town that got hold of me. They do water. That's why I was using the water thing. They were approached by a Muslim these guys, and they said, we'll make your product halal. You'll open up the whole market of Muslims to you, and for that, we need 300,000 rand a year. Halal is a multi-billion dollar industry. $2.9 billion a year across the world. South Africa, as you've just seen, is supporting terrorism through halal. You are supporting terrorism through halal. You have at the moment, you have no choice because almost everything, all your products, go to your fridge, take everything that is halal out, and work out how many hundreds of thousands of rand through minuscule, because it's eventually passed on to the consumers. What do you think the Muslim population is in South Africa? 2%. Someone answered there. You were too quick. Someone was supposed to say 30%. Who thought it was higher than 2%? Let's go there. Okay. It's about 1.5%. But when you go into the shops, I would say, conservatively, 80% of all food products is halal, supporting 1.5%. So this fallacy of saying we are opening up a market to you, they're opening up a market of 1.5%. Do you know the nougat, Wedgwood nougat? Okay. So I've got a friend who works with Wedgwood nougat. And I phoned them. I said, you guys have this halal sticker on your thing. What is that about? And they said, actually, we've decided not to pay it anymore. And they were paying a couple of 100,000 rand a year for the use of that halal sticker. And I said, why? And they said, well, it's actually quite expensive. It's quite a lot of money. And also, they've said that we can't mix our milk chocolate and our dark chocolate together. They have to be two separate machines. And that means we have to put in 750,000 rands worth of equipment to change so that they could come in and have a halal sticker. And so we've decided not to do it. And I said, we'll probably take a hit. We expect maybe a 20, 30% reduction. But, we're making a stand against this. This is extortion. So I said to them, are you saying that you think it's 20, 30% Muslim population? And they said, yeah. I said, well, would it encourage you to say it was 1.5%? And they were like, almost fell off their chairs. So that's the best news we've heard. They were thinking of a 30% loss, and now they only might get 1.5%. I don't think they're going to have any loss at all. And yes, if you guys go all buy nougat Wedgwood nougat, if you see us hasn't that halal stamp, support them. They're making a stand. So it is a way of generating finance. Spiritually, you might have heard that the product has been prayed over. Okay. It only happens when something is slaughtered, when blood is shed. When something is killed, the throat has to be slit, and it has to be bled out. It's a way of killing. Okay, so that is only to meat. And when it's cut, they say a prayer over the animal, and they declare the animal in the name of Allah, and to make sure that the animal hasn't been sacrificed to any other gods. Okay. So, yeah, chickens and rabbits and things like that. Anyway, so that is the only prayer that is said. So spiritually, it has some significance. Financially, it has a much, much bigger significance. Let me just read you a couple of things about halal. So this is from the World Halal Forum. It says, halal food is now everywhere. We must ensure that the halal certification follows clear standards with independent auditing so that people are confident that they can see what they can see is halal and wholesome. Halal isn't about food anymore. It is about the medicine we take and the things we use. It is an entire lifestyle marker that crosses racial, cultural, geographical, and even religious borders. So they're saying halal is for everyone. Doesn't matter what religion. It is good for you. It is wholesome. It's a lifestyle. And people are buying into this. The shared values of trust and integrity create a long foundation to avoid the prohibited and harmful, and to promote the permitted and the good, not just on our products, but also on our finance, our business practices, from farm to fork to finance. Who's seen the ABSA Sharia Islamic finance stuff? Yes, and I freaked out there. Also, a $2 trillion industry, Sharia finance. This is something that also from the World Halal Forum, also on the website. It's all open source. We have taken the bull by the horn, so to speak, to steer the two Sharia-based industries, this is food and finance, towards a holistic halal economy that includes all sectors, from farm to fork to finance. This convergence will make both industries stronger and will give us a more resolute voice in the international business scene. Today, we have witnessed the start of Halal 2.0, a transformation of mindsets towards a value-based products and services, which in turn will give rise to areas of new growth and wealth creation. Where's that wealth coming from? Can you imagine? Let's say Iran has a population of 1% Christians. So you go to Iran, the Iranian government and the Iranian companies, and you say, hey, we want Christian symbols on all food products. All food products in Iran need to have Christian symbols because we are a minority, you need to look after us, please put Christian symbols. Not only that, pay us to put these Christian symbols on. Not only that, the money you use, the money that you pay us, we're going to build churches and we're going to build Christian schools and we're going to spread Christianity in Iran. Sounds quite ridiculous, hey? Is it not ridiculous that it is happening in our country, in our continent? Islam functions of raising its profile. 1%, 1.5% has an impact in the whole country. This is a picture in Uganda. It's the biggest mosque in Africa until the one that was built in Joburg. It's massive. And it kind of dominates the whole city of Kampala. It dominates. Islam is about dominating power, faith, power, territory. Red flags, anyone yet? Okay, carry on. Rhetoric. So they're spread through building of schools, food aid, all of this other stuff, but there's a lot of speeches that are made. This guy, Ibrahim Desai, anyone ever heard of him? Okay, if you haven't heard of him, if you drive towards Pietermaritzburg on the right-hand side, there's a big Islamic center. This is the dude. Okay, he runs a website called Ask Imam. He is one of the most respected Islamic scholars in the world. He issues things called fatwas. Okay, so Muslims, they have a number of holy books. One of them is called the Quran, the other is called Hadith. The Quran is Muhammad's, Allah's exact words to Muhammad written down in a book, okay, his exact words, supposedly. The Hadith is everything that Muhammad did, that because he was seen as perfect, Muslims need to follow his example. So there's the Quran and there's the Hadith. All of these books were written 150 years after Muhammad's death. So there's no written records up to that point. So there's a lot of rubbish. And a lot of things have been changed over the years, and a few things that are added, and these guys don't agree with this. And so you need Islamic scholars to tell you what is what. And here's one of these Islamic scholars. And when a confusion arises, so Islam is still kind of really stuck in the 6th or 7th century, the 7th century. It's like really stuck in that. And it's trying to run a religion stuck in there. And they have no way of merging modern society with the laws of Islam. So what do you do about this? What do you do about that? I don't know if the soap I'm using is halal. What do I do about getting on a plane and sitting next to an unbeliever because the Quran says I need to kill him? What do I do? So this guy kind of gives guidance to some of this. So these are some of the things that are coming out of something that is just up the road. If a country doesn't allow the propagation of Islam to its inhabitants in a suitable manner or creates hindrances to this, then the Muslim ruler will be justified in waging jihad against this country. So what he's saying is, if Muslims aren't allowed to be Muslims and spread Islam in the country as freely as they can, then we are justified in taking action, waging jihad against this country. So the message of Islam can reach its inhabitants, thus saving them from the fire of hell. If the unbeliever allows us to spread Islam peacefully, then we should not wage jihad against them. Basically, it's a threat, saying, if you don't let us practice Islam, we have no other choice but to wage jihad against you. On the obligation of Muslims to enter into jihad, presently jihad is not compulsory upon every Muslim. It is compulsory upon those who are directly brutalized and harassed by disbelievers. Jihad is compulsory upon them. If they do not suffice, Muslims geographically closest to them are obliged to take up arms. And if they also do not, if that's not sufficient, Muslims closest to the second group, and so on and so on. Basically, if no one's acting, you have to act. On the question of whether or not non-Muslims should be killed, he answered, the statement promoted killing of non-Muslims is vague and sweeping and is very much open to misinterpretation. So he's trying to be nice, don't kill non-Muslims. So Muhammad, peace be upon him, promoted the killing of these non-Muslims who were actively engaged in destroying Islam and the Muslims. This is the command of Allah himself in the Quran. This type of killing is not only permissible, but is commendable and worthy of reward. Killing of non-Muslims. The Muslims pray a number of times a day. One of the prayers they say it 17 times a day. They say, do not let us fall into deception like the Christians and the Jews. They say that 17 times a day. There's no wonder Muslims are so confused about Christianity. There's no wonder Muslims are so confused about Israel. They say it's hammered into them. They pray it 17 times a day. If you said that prayer 17 times a day, I think your mindset will also be changed. Persecution of Christianity is growing across the world. So Islam exploits a number of things. It exploits poverty. It exploits apathy. We've heard about that story of that school in Newcastle. It exploits nominalism. Christians that aren't actually Christians, they're only Christians in culture. Anti-Western, anti-colonial attitude. A lot of African countries, including our own government, is very anti-Western. They would rather support the Muslim cause because they believe they are against colonialism. And Muslims present themselves as anti-colonialism. If you actually study it, they've created more bondage than any colonial government ever did. They promoted slavery. They were the instigators of slavery. And also tribalism. So, are all Muslims like that? And the answer obviously is not. Okay? Otherwise, I don't think we'll all be here. When somebody says to you, what is the best, where are you going in Christianity? What is the ideal you're going to? For us, to be the best Christian is to be like Christ and to follow Christ. And to be the fundamental Christian is to be as Christ-like as possible. That is loving, peaceful, humble, servant-hearted, and all of those great things that we learn. When Muslims try to be the best Muslim they can be, this is the line they go down. So you would start off as cultural Muslims. Muslims that are born into Islam, they don't really practice it. They just are Muslim because they are born into that country, that culture, and they're culturally Muslims. They might observe one or two Islamic things every now and again. And then you have traditional Muslims that are a little bit more radical, and it goes further and further down. You get theologically educated. They start understanding the core of Islam. They become Sharia compliant, puritanical. They become Islamists, radical Muslims, and then radical Muslim terrorists. That is the line. If you want to be the best possible Muslim, that is where you're going. The more you study Islam, that is where you're going. The more we study the Bible, the more we follow Christ, it's a different direction. I've often heard people say radical Islam or terrorism to Islam is like Ku Klux Klan is to Christianity. That is wrong, okay? Radical Christianity is radical Christianity. That is giving your life for someone, is loving people to your core, is bringing about peace, bringing people into joy and freedom. That is radical Christianity. Radical Islam is very, very different. So when Muslims say they are a peaceful religion, they probably aren't at that stage yet. So once the community is well organized, its leaders should strive. So talking about an Islamic community. So once the Islamic community is well organized, its leaders should strive to seek recognition of Muslims as a religious community having its own characteristics by the authority. Once recognized, the community should continue to request the same rights as other religious communities that enjoy in that country. Eventually, the community may seek to gain political rights as a constituent community of the nation. Once these rights are obtained, then the community should seek to generalize its characteristics in the whole nation. This is the Islamic strategy in countries. How it looks in diagrammatical format. So you have a creation of Islamic consciousness. You have an awareness that we are part of an Islamic nation, bigger than ourselves, bigger than our community. We are part of the nation, global nation of Islam. And that is where you see a lot more Muslims, and you're seeing a lot more now. Instead of just wearing a little hat, now they're wearing full robes. Instead of having a very short beard, they've got full beards. They're becoming aware. They're creating an identity amongst themselves and an identity with the nation of Islam. Then they create Islamic institutions. And you just drive down Durban and you'll see Islamic this and Islamic that, and you see this and that, and all of these different organizations. And they start engaging in communities, they start engaging at local level and political level, and they start putting pressure on the government to change things. We need Sharia law implemented here. We need this. We need that. We are a community, and they try and raise the profile as much as possible. And then there's the use of jihad and violence as necessary. What they say is that we have no control over our young people. We have no control. Like, we are just trying to be peaceful. It is you who's not allowing us to practice our religion. So when people blow things up, when they create violence and they do rioting, it's not our fault. It's really your fault. It is your fault that you're not allowing us. So if you don't do it, our guys are just going to do this stuff. So you need to comply before things start getting out of hand and they start blowing things up. And that is the victim mentality of Islam. We are always victims. That is what they say. We are victims. You need to look after us. And they demand rights and freedoms. Crazy thing is, they don't give those rights and freedoms to Christians living in Muslim countries. And this threat is over governments the whole time. Do you remember what happened with those Danish cartoons? Across the world. Rioting across the world. Because someone drew a picture of Muhammad. You might never have seen it. You probably haven't seen it. Anyone seen that cartoon? Okay, so what it is Muhammad standing at the pearly gates of heaven, and they'll hold it to suicide bombers, like Ahmed, the suicide bomber. And all these suicide bombers are lined up, and Muhammad's calling across. He said, "Oh, we need a few more virgins." And so that was the cartoon. It created mayhem across the world. Muhammad was drawn in a cartoon. What mayhem are we causing when Christians are persecuted?
Yeah.
What mayhem are we causing when churches are burnt down?
Yeah.
It's crazy. A cartoon versus people being burnt. On Sunday in Garissa, in northern Kenya, a friend of mine actually lives there. So Muslims came in and threw a whole lot of hand grenades and went with AK-47s to 2 churches there. In Jos, we're looking at now tens of thousands of Christians that are either homeless or dead in Jos by religious persecution. Yet governments bow down to not drawing a cartoon. Just some pictures of anti-Christian violence across the world. So, creating an Islamic State, you saw the 4 processes. Once an Islamic State is created, you have this thing called the Pact of Umar, which is how Muslims govern non-Muslims. And it says things like, we shall not build, and this is what, if you are a Christian or a non-Muslim, you have to sign, okay? We shall not build in our cities and our neighborhoods new monasteries, churches, convents, or monk cells, nor shall we prepare by day or night such things. We shall not manifest our religion publicly. We will not display our crosses or our books. So they're saying, that's fine. You guys can practice your religion. You can still worship. But, they're not really free. When you talk about Christianity, it's called freedom of worship, but not freedom of religion. So a lot of Christians in Muslim countries have freedom of worship. They can meet together. So not always, but they can meet together in some countries. But they don't have freedom of worship, freedom of religion, because they can't spread Christianity. They can't tell others about God. Okay, reaction to Christian mission. The propagation of the proportion of missionaries to Muslims is much lower than the rest of the world. So missionaries to non-Muslims, 98%. Missionaries to Muslims, 2%. Interfaith dialogue. Christians often have to apologize for the perceived sins against Muslims while failing to raise issues such as persecution of Christians in Muslim worlds. So you have interfaith dialogue, which I'm sure most of you have heard, where Christians and Muslims and other faiths get together. But what happens is that Muslims are here, Christians are here, Christians go right over here to meet. And Muslims don't even go. Christians have to apologize for all kinds of things. And what often happens is Muslims say, we'll only get into interfaith dialogue and understanding and tolerance if you promise not to spread Christianity in our countries. So there's a danger of theological fundamentals being undermined. And if I had more time, I'll tell you about Rick Warren's prayer at the inaugurational. Do that. Okay. So, when Barack Obama was inaugurated, Rick Warren, which we all know, the Purpose-Driven Life, Purpose-Driven Church, was invited to give the opening prayer and bless it. What he did was he followed the format of an Islamic prayer, but in English. Translated, so the declaration he used at the front was, there's no other God but God. He is one. That's what he said. In it, so he didn't consult Christian scholars on Islam. He consulted Muslims and said, if I had to pray, what would be non-offensive to you? And they said, well, if you pray like this, it'll be fine. One of the things he says, I prayed to my Lord and Savior, and he said, Jesus and Isa. Okay. Now we know the Islamic word, Jesus is considered prophet in Islam, and they call him Isa. However, by saying Isa, he is saying Jesus is a man and only a prophet. If you wanted to say Jesus is God, you say Isa Messiah. Okay? So what he's declaring to the whole Islamic world, Jesus, this is one of the major Christian guys that influences churches. Jesus is a man, declaring it across the world. So interfaith dialogue can also lead to reluctance to evangelize and commit to mission. Also what happens is, and I know this from working with a number of organizations across Africa, if they want to enter into, get finance from the UN, from different USAID and different organizations like that, they say, are you faith-based? And they say, yes. Are you involved in interfaith dialogue? No funding for you. Okay, we are. So that's fine. We'll give you funding, but we're going to give you the same amount of funding as Muslims. 50-50. However, Muslims in those countries might be 5 to 1%. They get the same amount as Christians. This is happening all over. The future. So we're coming to an end now, almost. So this is something I actually wrote in, I think, 2011. And someone said, what is the future? And I gave a presentation, and I said, there's growing support for the Islamization of Islamic world. So what that is happening is, that triangle that I said, okay? The trend is people moving downwards. Up to now, there's been a lot of cultural Islam. Since 2001, there's been a resurgence of the Islamic identity. It's like kind of polarized Muslims. And they're moving down towards that point. There's growing emphasis on the Ummah, which is the Islamic nation, the culture, the community of Islam. There's a drift to conservatism. Governments increasingly emphasize Islamic identity. And here's some interesting points. So I wrote this a couple of years ago. Islamicist groups are constantly seeking to undermine and take over semi-secular states. There's growing instability in the Islamic world. Fast-growing young populations are restless, alienated, and volatile. Governments in the region remain weak, corrupted, and ineffective. Fault lines and internal clashes are happening. What happened a couple of months later? What is this called? The Arab Spring, it's called. Supported by the whole world, supported by the West, Barack Obama gave $800 million towards supporting the Spring Uprising, which is great. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. I wonder what's going to happen, because there was a number of young people that did it. In Egypt, there was a bunch of students that used Facebook and Twitter to mobilize, and it was mainly done by young people. He was an old man there. But it was mainly done by young people. So, he just spent some time in the sun. These are the countries that it affected. Every single one of them was a secular state. They might have been kind of considered themselves as Islamic, but they weren't Islamic in that there was a separation of religion and state in every one of those countries. We're still waiting the outcome of Syria. Okay? When Iraq fell, 400,000 Christians fled from Iraq. 400,000 Christians were living in Iraq, and they fled to Syria for safety. The Syrians embraced them, and the government said, we will help you. A secular, although Islamic, was secular. Okay? What will happen to those 400,000 Iraqi refugees, let alone the 1 million or 2 million Christians that currently live in Syria when Syria falls to extremists? So we've got the Arab Spring, giving the opportunity. So, Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood has just won the elections. Okay? The Muslim Brotherhood is one of the most radical Islamic political parties out there. Their goal is to implement long-term radical agenda to establish an Islamic state. They are actively working. So what had happened with these secular states, they were really upset with the government, and rightly so in many cases. They were overthrown, and many of them were like anarchists. They didn't like the government, but they had no plan after that. There was a vacuum created. In step radical Islam. We have an agenda, we have a plan, we have an identity, we'll take you forward. And you can go through all of those states and look at all the governments who have now replaced the governments that have been toppled. All radical Muslim, radical Islam. The rise of Salafists, and this is a fancy word to say radical. So there's a rise of, we want to take over the world for Islam. There's a rise of that. Absolute Islamic rule and jihadists. So there's more violence happening. Spiritually, Muslims are looking towards something called the return of the caliphate. And this is the person who's going to succeed Muhammad. So it's like a return, a Messiah that is coming, okay? Who's going to unite all the Arabs together, all the Muslims together, and going to unite them into one massive Islamic world. And they're looking towards that. Muslims believe they're living in the end times. They believe that the Caliphate is on his way. He is around the corner. And they've seen what happened with the spring offensive, the Arab Spring. They see it as a sign towards their end times. And they say, I give glad tidings based on the glad tidings of Muhammad, the Caliphate, that there will be a Caliphate in the end times, and who knows, the events that are taking place in the Muslim worlds may be paving the way to the return of him. During Ramadan last year, I was talking about political reports, prediction reports, and Islamic research, all of which indicate that the new era for the Caliphate is on the way. These two guys, and there's another one here, they are part of a council that will appoint this new guy. And they're the top Muslim scholars, and they're the council that give authority to this new guy. And they're waiting, they're seeing this as the sign towards the end times. They're saying it's imminent. They say we want to this is something about not separating religion and politics. They want them together. And so we come back to this, the Muslim nation coming together through this. I mentioned this before. If you look there, there's the Calipha's office in preparation for him to come back. This is how they would run it. This is off a website. You might not see it, but they've got Department of Properties, Department of Grants, the Calipha's House, Department of Emergency, Department of State Services, Department of Jihad. Under Department of Jihad, Armed Forces Agency, Armament Agency, Weapons Industry Agency. Okay, so I don't want to be the prophet of doom here, guys. But I want you to understand, from the Islamic point of view, they are also looking for the return of someone. And they are preparing themselves for the return of someone. And when it happens, they will see it as a sign to go to war against anything that stops the rule of Islam. Okay. I'm trying to help you understand the mindset of Muslims. And this is their end goal. United States of Islam. That's what they're working towards. Some things to pray for, some things to get involved in. Politics and government, social issues, education, spiritual, business, commerce, finance, mission and evangelism, legislation and law, infrastructure and aid. We can do it. If we rise up as Christians, we can do it peacefully, through love. We can do it. Understanding God, okay, our God that we serve. Islam, the God that Islam serves, looks to destroy, looks to bind, looks to oppress. The God that we serve, look at these amazing words. This is from Acts and in the message. The God who made the world and everything in it, this master of sky and land, doesn't live in custom-made shrines or need the human race to run errands for him, as if he couldn't take care of himself. So God is all-powerful on his own, but he created us through love. He makes the creatures do not make him. Starting from scratch, he made the entire human race, and made the earth hospitable with plenty of time and space for living. God creates space. I've heard the definition. The definition of love is creating space for somebody to grow. God creates space and time for living so that we may seek after God, not just grope around in the dark, but actually find him. He doesn't play hide and seek with us. He's not remote, he's near. We live and move in him. We can't get away from him. We serve a God that is all-powerful. When we look at these problems, we think, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. I'd rather have run out. I wish I hadn't come here. But we serve a God that can do this. It's not us that is going to win this. It is only God that is going to win it. This is what he says in Hebrews. Do you not see? So Hebrews 11 is all about building up faith. So, we learn about faith. By faith they did this. By faith they did that. By faith they did that. And from there it goes on to establishing the kingdom of God. And do you not see what we've got? An unshakable kingdom. We look at all these problems and we shake in ourselves. But God's kingdom is unshakable. And do you see how thankful we must be? Not only thankful, but brimming with worship, deeply reverent before God. For God is not an indifferent bystander. He gets involved. He's actively cleaning house, torching that all that needs to burn, and he won't quit until all is cleansed. God himself is fire. And I just want to leave that with you. I know we're going to go into time of worship and prayer, and I want you to focus on the worship of God in this. God's kingdom is unshakable, and we need to worship him because his kingdom is unshakable. We will win if we worship God and we allow God to awaken us to mobilize. Thank you very much.